Hello, it's Walter, and you're probably wondering, wow, this is a nicely framed shot. Well, that's because you're looking at me from inside where my glove box used to be. See, the place where I live, it's gone downhill quite a bit in the last handful of years. A lot of shady people living around here, and they break into my Jeep all the time. It's a soft top, so I don't even bother locking it because they'll just cut the soft top to get in it. And they just steal petty stuff all the time. I've talked with police officers about it several times, and they said it's probably somebody who lives right around here. He says it's probably even possibly one of the neighbors just across the fence, because those kids are always out there smoking pot and everything, which attracts not the best people. So anyway, just recently, a few months ago, someone broke my glove box, and they actually ripped the door right off the glove box and kept it, which includes the lock. So if they take that lock somewhere and say, well, I lost the key for this, and some shady person makes a new key for that, then they could come and easily start up my Jeep. So I put a new keyed ignition in my Jeep so that couldn't happen. And I had canvassed the entire area around here on foot when this first happened, and looked for the glove box lid, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So whoever broke it off my Jeep literally took it and kept it with them. So that's the only reason why I could see they would do that, because they left the rest of the glove box here. Regardless of that, you're probably wondering, well, why am I filming this? Well, to me, having the ability to adapt and to improvise and adapt to things with what you have involves more than just training. You know, it is a good thing to be able to train with anything, anywhere, at any time, and be able to get in a good workout to accomplish whatever physical goals you're trying to achieve. Maybe, you know, body fat loss and body comp, and more strength and endurance and stamina or work capacity, whatever you're looking for. But in order to do those things, you have to use your mind. And so to me, yeah, I could go out and buy a new glove box, which is about $200 for a nice metal one, but I decided I'm going to try to build one myself. And so that'll be a challenge for me to do that, something I haven't done before. Though I'll be using skills I've learned from other areas of my life and applying those techniques and skills to making my glove box. So that's just something I wanted to show people, and we'll talk more about this as we go along. But right now, I'll show you the little opening that's left where my glove box was. So here you can see where the glove box used to be. I pulled it out. I have it here. It's just all made of plastic. It just inserts like this, and the part that they took, I took the screws out of here. This is the hinge part right here, and they literally broke this door off right here. It had a lock on it, so I can't even buy a door for this. You have to buy the whole piece, and it's new. You can't buy it new anymore. You can only buy used on eBay, which is like $50 or $60. And I thought, well, if I put a new one on there, someone's just going to bust it off anyways and do the same thing. Fortunately, they did not steal anything, and my registration papers and everything, they just left it all laying on the floor. It's kind of ridiculous. But so this just come out. It was a pain in the butt to get out, because there's 3 screws that hold it up here under the dash, and then several screws underneath here. But on the back side of this, there's actually 2 screws on either side. You can see here and here, and also on the other end of this, and they screw through these holes. So the only way you can get to that is you have to reach up under here to get a driver to pull them out, and there's not much room. You can get like maybe 2 or 3 clicks on your little ratchet. You can't even get your hand up in there to turn like a screwdriver or anything. And then to do the other side, what I actually did is I pulled this faceplate off here. I took this off. There's like 3 screws up here, 3 across the bottom, and I pulled this little thing off, and then I pulled my radio out, and I was able to get my hand in from where the radio is around to the 2 screws that went through the backside there. So anybody who's got like the Jeep Wrangler, this style, which is like I think from 88 to 95 or something like that, it's called the YJ Jeep Wrangler. that's how you can get that glove box out. And I'm going to build one out of metal and show you how I'm going to do it. So let's head out back and have a little fun. Okay, so we're back in the wrecking yard, and if you wonder what that noise is, that high chirp sound, that's cicadas. They come out in the summer when it's very hot here in Tucson. It's like 104, 106 in the shade right now. So anyway, it's pretty toasty. I'm going to show you more about my glove box build and what I'm doing with that. And maybe this will help out anybody else who has a YJ Jeep Wrangler that needs to or wants to make a glove box, and I'll talk more about the reasons why I'm doing that as we go along in this video. So let's cut to a different view. Here you can see the little template I made out of cardboard. I had it all taped up, but I actually cut it because I'm making all my little parts. So looking at it, you can see here's the opening for my glove box. Now when you look at it, you might think it doesn't look too big, but when you compare it to the original, it's probably got twice the volume as here. Now I don't know if I'm going to put a grab bar on mine or not. I'll wait and see when I have it fabbed up most of the way and get it inside my Jeep, see how it looks, and then I'll determine whether I want to put a grab bar on it or not. And then I'm eliminating this top little section here because this never lock. You can slide stuff in there, but it'd have a tendency to bounce out if you're on a rough road, and then people would steal stuff out of there. They'd take my pencils and stuff or my baling wire. So let's take a look at some of the parts. Okay, so here you can see all the parts I have cut out right now to actually make the box itself. I'll have to make a faceplate for it, and also a door. I'll have to hinge it and then source a little lock or make my own lock. But and I'll give you the dimensions of this too, how I did this. Now this box, when we look at it, the interior dimension is just shy of, well, it's about 10 3/4 inches in width. So that's about how long I'm making this myself, about 11 1/4 inches long. So you can kind of determine that as you know, if you want to fab up a piece of cardboard, what I would do is I would cut out all your pieces out of cardboard, tape them together, and then see how they fit inside your glove box and make sure there's going to be clearance for it, because there might be something in your Jeep that's a little bit different than mine, because mine's a 95 Jeep Wrangler. If you use the dimensions that I give you, I would fab up with cardboard first to see if it fits, and then if it doesn't, make an adjustment here and there, which is what I had to do when I was doing this, because originally I had this a little bit taller, but it kept hitting part of the firewall back there, a little brace, so I had to cut this a little shorter, and then I determined that it fit. Now, in looking at this, you're probably realizing that this is cut at an odd angle, and this is actually my opening, so you might wonder, why do I have this angle cut like this? If I was to put a square on here, you can see that there's a gap here. Why not just make this square? Well, my reasoning is because this is the face that you're looking at when you reach into your glove box. I kind of cut this at an angle like this, because then when this is here, what will happen is, in order to make this flush, I'll have to tip it like that. So this will be tipped back a little bit, which creates a little bit of a downward slope into the glove box. So when you put stuff in there and you open the door, it's less apt to slide out. So, and it doesn't really lose much space at all by doing it this way. So I figured that might be a nice little thing to do with my glove box. Now in cutting these, I cut these on a bandsaw that I have, which I'm going to be showing you. And I did run into a couple of issues with this, depending on the width of my long pieces I need to cut. And you're probably wondering what these little cuts are. Well, this is the dimension I'm looking for. The width is about almost 11 1/4, where I cut these through, and you can kind of see them. And this is actually where I'm going to bend these. So what I did is I took a scrap piece and I bent it, I cut a groove in it with my bandsaw, and then I bent it and you can see it makes a really nice bend. And I don't have a shear to cut this stuff. If you had a small shear or a shop that you can go to, you could cut this stuff up really quick, scribe it all out, cut it, put it in a bender, be done with it. But I doubt even in a bender you're going to get as nice a bend as I did here by cutting this groove in here about halfway through or slightly more. And I'll show you how I did that on my bandsaw. And you could also do this if you don't have a bandsaw. You can use an angle grinder. Has a flap wheel on it. I bought this one at Harbor Freight probably 10-12 years ago for like 10 bucks. I think they're probably $14 or $20 now. It's got a flap disc on it. But if you're going to cut something like this, you know, don't use one of these grinding wheels. I see a lot of people use something like this to cut plate like that, and it's just ridiculous because you're removing so much material. It gets a lot hotter and it just wastes a lot of material. So get yourself, rather than a grinding wheel, get yourself a cutoff disc. This one's, I don't know, like an 1/8 inch thick, and this one is, I don't know, maybe a 1/16, 1.6 millimeters. Yeah, it's a 1/16. So these work really good for cutting something like this. You waste a lot less material and it'll cut through way quicker. And you don't try to cut it in one shot. Make one pass and then make another pass. And the way to do that is you want to set this thing up and clamp it, and then use your other hand and guide yourself. Pay attention to what you're doing. Anyway, that's a way you can cut this even on the cheap if you don't have access to a shear or a bandsaw like I have. Okay, so now we're going to look at the dimensions of this. Remember, this is for a 1995 YJ Jeep Wrangler. So any YJ, these dimensions should work. But as I said, I'd make one out of cardboard first. I'd just lay it out on cardboard, cut it, tape it all up. Make your top, your sloping part, the back, and the bottom, and 2 ends. Tape the thing all together and see how it fits. And some might be wondering, well, why did I want to put a bend in here? You know, if you have a bender, you can bend this stuff, but the issue with that, it's going to be hard to get your dimensions is where you want unless you're used to bending material and calculating that. And others might think, well, why don't you know, just weld this and butt it on here? You know, there we go, goes on the back. Why don't you just butt these pieces together and weld them, or lay a little square piece in there and tack it, which I could do. But this way I can actually put a piece on here, and as you can see, I can tack this a little bit on the back side, and then I can reinforce it by doing little tack welds on the inside too, so this will be really strong. Now with this, a couple important things to remember is this is basically 5 inches by 5 inches square approximately. The final dimensions I came up with 4 7/8 because I had to cut a little bit off it because I tipped it as I was showing you. So those are the dimensions. This is this is 4 7/8 down there. It's 4 7/8, 4 7/8, 5 inches high. So basically this is how I laid it out. This is a 90 degree here. This is 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees. You just got yourself a square piece of metal is what you're starting off with. So from this, I don't know, you could figure out the angles and everything, but when I was just fabbing this up and making it out of cardboard, I didn't know what angles I needed, so I just cut it and figured out a way to make it fit. And then I took the end piece off my cardboard and took one of these end pieces off, and then I kind of measured the dimensions and then just rounded them down slightly to get this to fit the way I want it to. So you've 3 inches to here, and then you've got 1 1/16 inches from this corner to this point. So if you figure those 2 dimensions out and 2 inches here, you could scribe a line across there, and that'll cut that off. That'll fit perfectly. And then the same with this. This is 4.5, and then 3/8 little stub here going to a 0 point up here, and then just cut that piece off, and this is what you're going to end up with. So these are all the dimensions, and I'll try to put this on my website, take a picture of it and get it on my website if I can, so it'll make it a little easier. But the box is actually 5 inches high, 4.5 inches deep, about 11 inches long. You might be able to get 11.25 or not, I don't know. You just have to check with your own vehicle. So those are the dimensions there, and based on this, it'll be pretty easy to lay this out and cut it out. And remember, you need 2 of these. And then the dimensions for the top, this back sloping part, the back and the bottom, well, it's just based off of this, you know. Once you cut these out, I would actually measure these and then cut out your pieces accordingly. And if your cuts and everything are accurate, well, this will be 3 inches wide, so you need 1 piece there, 1 piece here, 1 piece here, 1 piece there, so 4 pieces. And that'll get you the box part of your glove box. And just in case the picture didn't come out very well, or what I just videoed didn't come out well, I'll take another little video of this, and you could always pause this video and then write the dimensions down. And basically, when you're cutting this thing out, all you're doing is you're shifting it down into a corner like this. So when you lay it out on your piece of metal, that's what you'll want to do, is lay it out in a corner and then just come across, come straight down, and put your dimensions on here, and you'll get what you need. Okay, this is just a Harbor Freight 4-inch by 6-inch bandsaw. When I originally bought it, it was like $200 with a coupon. Had it for a year and a half now, and some people might think, well, $200, you know, you could have bought a glove box, because a new one made out of metal is like $200. But the issue is then I'm not learning anything, and I'm not trying to develop new skills and test the skills that I have. So if you're always buying things that you could learn how to make yourself, you're really kind of shortchanging yourself, so to speak. And I've made so many different things with this, and it's helped me in so many different ways. It's actually saved me money with tools as with skills. You're always better off buying the tool, learning how to use it, paying for the skill if you have to learn how to do it properly, because in the long run you're going to be far more ahead than someone who's always having somebody else do something for them. And if you want to develop that ability to improvise and adapt and overcome whatever challenges you're facing with, that's the mindset you have to get in. Yeah, sometimes it's just better to pay somebody like a professional, but as a mechanic used to tell me, the only difference between a professional and an amateur is a professional knows how to fix his mistakes. So everybody makes mistakes. So the issue is cutting on this bandsaw. As I'm cutting through here, at some point, because of the width, it hits. This is called the depth of the throat, and this is the width. And so this plate hits. So what I had to do is I'd turn it around, and then I was able to cut through on the other side, and this was a bigger piece, so that hit. So I had a section in here that I could not cut on my bandsaw. So how did I finish this cut? See, thinner strips would pass right through. So what I did is I actually clamped this onto my workbench, and then I used a hacksaw at an angle. See, if you go like this, your hacksaw will hit, but I tipped it enough where I was able to cut through this. And then I finished the cut coming back from the other side. So I don't need to demonstrate that. Hopefully people can figure out how to do that. And if you just are careful and cut this out with an angle grinder, you won't even have this issue. Or if you have access to a shear. Now, in case anybody's watching this, I only put one screw in here. I didn't put both because I'm not actually cutting anything, so I'm going to remove this screw. And then you have this little plate that goes on here to cut in the horizontal position. And that little plate is more or less just a guard to keep anything from getting jammed in between these two wheels. So one of the issues if you're going to cut these little grooves in your plate is I just use my bandsaw and cut them like this. But the problem is if you look at this, you can see that the blade is hitting here, but it's not hitting here. This gap right here is actually bigger than the thickness of the metal. So if I try to cut this groove like this, it's going to cut all the way through over on this side. What you need to do is raise this other side up like this. So how I accomplished that, so I just took a piece of metal rod laying around, dropped it in here, and then when I tighten that up and brought this down, now you can see these teeth are touching pretty much all the way across. So come back down, and that's a little better. It's, you know, it's probably about the same, except now it's hitting here before over here. So I want to try to adjust that a little bit. Okay, so what I got is a couple washers. I'll just set them over on this side because I want this to slope that way. And you want to remember, when you're making these grooves according to where your line is, I want to make sure my edge of my teeth, the kerf, is on that side of the line, because I want that dimension between the lines left over. I want to adjust my blade so it's on the outside of that line. So kind of play around with this a little bit, and I'm not looking at the top edge of the blade, I'm actually looking at the little teeth. The kerf makes it wider than this part so the blade doesn't bind, just like a wood saw. Metal saws are the same. So I'll adjust that about where I want it. Tighten my clamp down, and let's give this a shot. But I got it locked in there good right now, and let's fire this thing up. So there you can see I'm probably about halfway through that, and then you want to check the other side just in case this is, you know, hitting one side a little more than the other. And that's pretty good. Okay, one thing we want to make sure that we do also is we want to clip these corners off at like a 45-degree angle or thereabouts. So, and I'll show you why I want to do that. Actually, as I look at this, I think it's better to bend this first, because this little part here, if this is cut off at that angle across here, it's going to be really difficult to get this little section over here to bend properly. So I'm going to have to bend it first, then cut them. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of bending. See how this works. This is a little bender I made for something else, where I'm actually building myself a air rowing machine from scrap metal, and I'm recording all that, and when that's done I'll be putting that online, but I'll probably put that in my paid video area. So this is my little bender I used for making my air blades, and I'm going to use it for this and see how it goes. Not quite a 90, so I'll back it out just a little bit. That's about all she'll do. This is thicker material than I made my fan blades out of, but I could finish this off in my vise. What I'll do is I'll leave this up a little bit. Beautiful. So I'm going to bend the rest of them. No reason for me to show you how me doing all that. One of the issues is when I get to this wider piece, it won't fit in here because I made this for smaller things and I haven't made a bigger bender yet. So with this one, I'll just clamp it in my vise, and I'd already started bending it. And the biggest issue when you're bending it is you don't want to push up here where you got more leverage, because this will all bow. You can take that bow out of it after you're done if you want. You want to try to keep the pressure down here lower, so that's less apt to create a bow. Then once you get it down a little ways, put some pressure on it. This one's perfect. There you go. Okay, so you're probably kind of wondering why I am notching this. Just to show you when I put this thing together. Number one, remember this isn't cut at a 90-degree angle. It's got a slight angle to it. So when I match this up on this corner over here, this is going to stick out a little bit. So of course I want to notch this side. But then also when I put this other piece on here, I have two more pieces. When this goes on here, see how it's going to overlap right here, and I don't want that gap. So I'm going to just notch this all out so this will fit together really nice. So I actually couldn't cut them on my saw because of the angles and everything. So I've got this cheap, like $40 Harbor Freight with a coupon vise, and it rotates, works really good for things like this. So you could use a little cutoff blade on this if you want, but I hate noise any more than I have to, so I'm just going to clamp a pair of vice grips on there, cut this carefully, and I don't even have to cut all the way through this, you know, just get a good little start going there and kind of flex it. If this unbends too much, you can hammer that back, but I'll just cut it a little more. Then I'll try flexing a little bit there. See, now it's actually flexing in my groove, and it's not flexing the rest of this. So, and before I assemble this whole thing, I'll actually hammer it all flat, make sure it's all nice and square. There you go. Okay, so here you can see I've roughly assembled my box with a couple pair of vice grips, and if you look at this area right here, you can see that I already cut the little corners off these long pieces. I need to file them down a little bit more. If you look here, you can see the gap between here, all crossed here. Part of that is because this is bowed a little bit. When I do my final assembly on this, I want this to be closer like this, because it'll make it easier for me to run a nice little weld bead down along this little groove. So I don't want to open like that. And as you can tell, looking at it here, it's hitting these two pieces. So all I need to do is just file this area a little bit with a file, and then this will pinch together a little bit better, and this will help this form a little bit better. I could probably get away with it like this and just kind of pinch this together as I weld it and tack it here and there, but I'm just going to file it a little bit just for a nicer look, even though you're not going to see it because it's going to be inside the Jeep. Okay, so I did file these down a little bit. You can see they fit a little better, particularly this one. This one isn't as big a deal, but it was still hitting here, which pushed this open and created a bigger gap. So you can see my gaps along here look a lot better. So, and the other thing with this is if you don't have a welder, if you've got a drill and a good, you know, a pop rivet gun, you could just drill a couple holes in here and pop rivet this whole thing together. So there is a way to work around this if you don't have a welder. So it's just kind of thinking ahead and determining what you're going to do. And that's the same with anything that you're working on in life. It might throw you little curveballs and stuff, and that's where I like to think about the skills that you learn in one thing can be applied to what you're dealing with. It's not always a life and death matter. A lot of times it's just simpler things that if you could figure it out, it makes your life easier. So, or maybe it saves you a lot of money. Or even if it doesn't really save you money, it helps you develop a skill and test that skill and develop it even better. So, and as you can tell, you want to pay attention to details, because details are going to determine because details determine your success to a large degree with what's going to happen. So if you just haphazardly slap something together, it's not going to look nice, you know, like this. If I had high quality tools and a shop and a shear and all this stuff and some type of CAD program, it'd be a lot easier to do this, and I'm just doing this kind of the old school way. So I'm going to weld this up and let's get to that. So here you can get a good look at the ends. I just tacked it around here. Did the same on this other end, tacked it all up. I think it's going to be pretty solid. And if you look at my gaps, they actually look pretty good. Hopefully you can see that, how nice and even they are. And that just comes from paying attention to detail in what you're doing. And a person wouldn't even need to weld these if you're just going to pop rivet these, and if your work is, you know, pretty high quality and you have nice seams like this, you could actually just put some caulking on here or some like foil tape or something to seal this up better if you wanted to, or you could just leave it like this. It's not going to really hurt anything. So I'm debating on, I might just run a couple little tacks on the outside of this just to maintain its integrity a little bit better. And I might just do that myself, maybe put some foil tape or something on here to seal it up more, and then I'll go ahead and I'll paint this all. And I'm actually going to use a paint that will react with the rust, and I'll tell you about that in a little while, in a little bit here. So I'm going to tack that up, and that'll be finished with this for right now. And I need to do this box first in order to do the faceplate and the rest of the part that I need to do in my Jeep. So let me get this done, and we'll get back to you. You can begin to look at this a little bit more closely and see I'm just running some tacks along here. Some are a little bit better than others. This one's actually pretty nice. And part of the reason is I was pulling these, whereas this I actually pushed the weld gun. Pulling as you're going like this, and the heat builds up on this tip. So as you're pulling, keeps feeding the wire into this, and this is going to get really hot. So with this thin material, this is 16 gauge, you got to go fairly quick. So it's actually better to push weld on this and weld like this, because then it's pushing the heat away and it's not like preheated. So with thin stuff you actually get a better weld, and you're actually less apt to get blow through on your metal, which will create little holes. So that's just a little trick for those that are maybe learning how to weld. I've never been certified as a welder, I'm just learning this stuff on my own. So there you go. I believe I might just finish welding this up and be done with it instead of using some type of tape, and then this thing will be really solid, and then we can go back out into the Jeep and I'll show you how I'm going to configure the rest of my glove box. So whatever you're dealing with, just use the tools you have. Always invest in knowledge and in tools, because it's going to help you rather than just having somebody else figure things out for you all the time or do it for you. And it's the same with nutrition and training and health and all that stuff. Research some things, but don't become paralyzed through analyzing things. Get to a point like, okay, I know this is right, this is good basic way to train, or this is a good basic way to eat. All the other stuff, you know, here and there, is people getting all kinds of arguments about that stuff, and a lot of times it doesn't mean hill beans. If you're eating half decent and you're training with a half decent program and you put in the effort and then pay attention to the details that apply to you and what you're trying to accomplish, you're going to get it done. So, okay, let's go. Okay, so I've got my box made, and the next thing I want to do is I want to put a flange around here. So I actually want to weld a little thin strip of metal that sticks up, you know, kind of like this, all the way around my box, so that when I insert it in here, my other frame that will cover all this up will actually overlap that a little bit. And then, so the next thing I need to kind of determine is how much room that I have on either side of this, and then the top to bottom, to weld a little plate all the way around here that kind of fills this gap in somewhat. But the other thought is when I put my door on here, I want to hinge my door off of this, but I also want my door not just to hit on this edge, I want my door to overlap this a little bit. So things will make more sense as I continue in this build. So I can butt this all the way across and then measure the distance here. So it's a little less than 7/8. And then I can divide that in half and then take a little bit off of that. So I want this to fit in here nice. So that's what I'm going to calculate right now, and then what I'll do is I'll cut these little metal strips out and I'll weld them to this, and I'll create a little lip that goes all around there, all around the perimeter of this box. So I'm going to take care of that. I'm going to do my dimensions and measure it, and I'll provide the dimensions that I use. Though for your Jeep the opening might be a little off or something, so I'm going to try to create a little bit of fudge room here. I'll make it a little bit smaller so it still might work for yours. But as I said before, you know, it's a smart thing to do to fab up something out of cardboard first and make sure it's all going to fit, and then always test fit your parts. You could tack weld a little bit, test fit it, and then if it looks like it's good, well then you can weld it up the rest of the way. So I'm going to get on that, and once I get my dimensions kind of figured out, I'll meet you in the backyard. Well, I don't think we actually made it out to the backyard. I did. I went back to my wrecking yard and fabbed up some more on my box. As you can see, I've got these little side pieces welded on here now, and I told you I'd give you the dimensions of these. These are 3/8 of an inch wide on the sides, and then the top and the bottom are a 1/2 inch wide. And what I did is I just took them and on this edge this way, I just welded it on the back side. So if you look at this, you can see the piece that I welded onto the back. So, and I'm going to round this all off, file it nice so there's no sharp edges or anything like that. And you can see how close it is, the dimensions with 3/8. I've got maybe an 1/8 of an inch on this side and a 1/16 on this if I adjust them a little bit. But now maybe this will start to make a little more sense, because this is going to be my faceplate, and I'll cut this out square. And what I want to do is I'm going to cut this so it overlaps this flat edge that I welded on here. It'll overlap it only about halfway inwards, and then what I want to do is when I put my door on here, I want it to overlap the other half of this flat piece all the way around, part way out. And that way when the door closes, it's got something to set against more than just the little edge of this metal. So then it's got a flat surface to set against, and then the faceplate will come down here and butt up against this, so it'll give me a nice transition. And that's kind of why I'm designing it this way. And so the faceplate, this is my template, and you can see I kind of traced it out here. I actually cut this hole in here, I figured out the dimensions, I fit it in here, and then I took a pencil and I traced it around as best I could inside while making sure this didn't move. And then I just went over my lines again so you can see my lines. But now I kind of need to figure out how to center this thing, and I might make a temporary little L bracket and drill a couple holes in it and a couple here, and then mount it on both sides, and then I can screw this to it, and that'll give me a way to anchor this right exactly where I want it to be. And then what I can do is put my faceplate in here and just trace out the interior of that around here. And then once I've got that traced on here, of course, I will take a little bit, maybe an 1/8 inch further from that, so that when I cut this out, my little template will run about the middle of this little strap material that I cut and welded on here. And that way my door will have something to rest against too. It'll make it a lot stronger, a lot more secure. So that's kind of the next step that I'm looking at doing. The issue is if I try to lift this up too high, it's hitting a little brace back there as part of the firewall. So you can see the gap at the bottom is less than the gap at the top. So trying to, you know, guesstimate that on my cardboard and everything, I don't think that's going to work as well as is just kind of getting this where I want it in here, and then anchoring it, and just split this difference in the middle. The biggest thing is I don't want it resting on anything back here, because there's the AC line and stuff back here. I don't want to break or bend anything, so I don't really want that bouncing off here. So probably my best bet is to stick something in there and get this flush, and I'll do it that way. So anyway, I'll do that, and I'll take care of that, and then I'll show you where I'm at. So I'll probably do this video in 2 parts, because this is a lot of information in one video. It's already going to be a half-hour long, I believe. So this is Walter. The neighbor just got home. They're looking at me weird. This is Walter signing off. I'll see you next week. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for part 2.